Okay, thanks everybody for coming. My name is Chris Rembold, and tonight's hat that I'm wearing is Planning Director, Assistant Town Manager. And with me tonight from our environmental contractors, TRC, is Scott Buchanan. Scott's the program manager for TRC and helping the town with this project. TRC has been involved for many, many years, and so we're happy to have that continuity. Tonight, we're here to give you an overview of the site investigation activities at the former Ried Cleaners at 218 Main Street. And, summarize what we found and summarize TRC's recommended cleanup approach for the site. Technically, what we're presenting is the ABCA, the ABCA analysis of Brownfield cleanup alternatives plan. That plan's online. It's in the libraries and the clerk's office as well, I believe. You can request a copy from me also. And I think the newspapers have also reported on it. But that plan is out there, and certainly feel free to review it. It's we'll take comments until I believe June 20th. In the meantime, we're developing the plans to hopefully have some contractors bid on the work. And Scott will tell us a little bit more about that. So we'll talk about the investigations, as I said, and the cleanup alternative that we recommend. The alternative is based on a few things that Scott will get into. It includes not only what can achieve the objectives of cleaning up the site to the best of our ability, but also, let's be honest, it depends in part on how much money we have to do it. The cleanup work will be funded in part through a cleanup grant from EPA awarded many years ago at this point for $500,000, some of which is paying for our environmental contractors, TRC, the large balance of which will be able to go towards actual digging at the site. That $500,000 is supplemented by another $560,000 made possible from EPA through the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. So brought to bear for this current action is over $1 million. And Scott will get into the details, but we'll certainly need, every penny of that, So let's look at where the site is. Most of you I know in this room, you're all familiar with where the site is, right downtown on Main Street, 218 Main Street. Just south of Rossiter Street, across from St. Peter's Church and across from the Mason Library, and then just north of the US Post Office. And by the way, Eric's jumping the gun. If you have questions, raise your hands. There's a question already.
Yeah, so when you say we, who is the we?
The we is the town.
And so is that the planning office, the selectmen, something else?
We is I'm not sure.
So when you say when we recommend this or whatever, who's the we? Is it the planning office, selectmen?
Yes, the recommendation is from the planning department with our contractors, CRC. Yes.
And the recommendation is to? Who do you make the recommendation to?
Well, it's not as if the select board needs to approve the action. What we do is we put together the plan, we work with our partners at US EPA. Does this plan achieve the objectives? Is it in line with the grant? And if we can get competitive bids, we will go with that plan. Yeah. Scott, do you want to talk a little bit more about what we found?
Yeah, sure. Just grab my notes from you. Thanks. So, as many of you may be aware, this site has been looked at by many people over the last number of years. Back in 2008, the dry cleaning facility was demolished. There was a building out behind the current street front. They removed 4 USTs at that time. 2 of them contained four underground storage tanks. 2 of them contained heating oil. 2 of them contained tetrachloroethene or PCE, which I'll be calling it, also a chlorinated VOC. That was what was used to dry clean clothes back in the day, but that is, that's the contaminant of the site. From 2008 to 2024, there have been numerous investigations at the site. Many of them are listed here on the slide. I'm not gonna go through them one by one, but they covered soil, groundwater, vapor, and hazardous building materials on the site. The town acquired the property through tax title in 2019, and EPA helped with a soil removal action from the original source area. We'll show some pictures in a little bit on where that is in the footprint of the former building and the underground storage tanks. So a little bit of remediation has been done, but there's still a lot there to deal with. So this is where the site is. You can see a lot of different marks on the site. Just to show you the number of borings and drilling locations that have been put in. There's also some pink and blue lines. We'll get into detail about those in a little bit, but those are underground utilities that have been that are at the site and the adjacent property that may be influencing where the contamination lies.
All of those little dots are test wells of some sort. It's either a well drilled into the groundwater or the soil or the bedrock at various depths, testing for various types of contamination at various depths. There's a lot of dots there. We've got a lot of assessment work done at various depths all over the site and in the surrounding area.
Is my question, is that, it cuts off for just the two tests on the other side of Main Street?
There's a few others. This is not the entire footprint of everything that has been done. There is some stuff that reaches out even further. But just to keep it concise we're mediating stuff on the property itself only with this cleanup. So we're really focusing on the site proper. The plume does not obey that property lines, unfortunately. So this red circle here is the approximate location of where the chlorinated VOCs, the PCE, was released. That's where the former building was, and the USTs were all in that area. So there's high concentrations of PCE and chlorinated VOCs were detected in the soil and groundwater in this immediate vicinity. And this is the same area that EPA did an excavation down to about 4 feet and repaved it afterwards, which is helpful because it wasn't all paved before, and that allowed for infiltration, and the paving does help slow down the movement of stuff. So this is a very approximate plume map of the shallow contamination in the groundwater. So this is where the VOCs have traveled. It looks like a large area, but it is limited, and a lot of the stuff on the edges of this are very low concentrations. And you can see that we do have an edge on this. It is heading towards the Housatonic River, but we do have constraint on the edge of that plume with our sampling.
Can you expand on that sounds like it's heading, you said heading as if it's still moving.
It is. We haven't seen much change in the down gradient stuff, but as groundwater flows, and that's the direction that groundwater flows, it will continue to move.
It's a very low concentrations as it reaches the far right side of the screen or the far easterly side of Main Street. It's at very low concentrations. If left alone, it will continue to travel, and it could concentrate more, but it's very, I don't know if diluted is the right word at that point, at those extreme fringes on the eastern end. It's very low concentrations of contaminants by the time it reaches that far eastern end of that dashed line.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do I say who I am?
if you'd like.
Not necessarily. Anyway, I'm just, how dangerous is it on the other side of the street?
It doesn't present a hazard to those buildings over there, which includes the library.
And that means the water or anything.
Well, the groundwater, is not used in this area for, like drinking water wells. So it's not a hazard to water that people are coming in contact with.
How deep is the water?
Varies, is it?
About 8 feet, there is some elevation changes around the site, but about 8 feet down. Any other questions at this point? Okay, there's two yellow spots, just, east of the, chlorinated VOC release, and that's where we're seeing some dense non-aqueous phase liquid. Now, that's a big term, DNAPL. It's free phase product. We're still seeing there's so much contamination in there that it separates from water. It's not dissolved. So that's an area that we want to, go after with our cleanup, funds. And also with that, as you can see, that both those DNAPL, spots are right along this linear, what we're calling a secondary source where there may be PCE. So what it looks like from the concentrations that we're seeing in the subsurface, in the soil and groundwater, is after that line, the concentrations decrease quite a bit. It looks like that utility corridor is sort of catching some of that contamination and holding it there and releasing it much slower past that. So we'll get into further, but with that information, that's sort of what we're trying to attack with the current funding. Few other of the findings. There's also an issue in deeper groundwater. That first plume was shallow groundwater. We have drilled some bedrock wells. EPA with their targeted brownfields work in the 2023 and 24 showed that there is more some contamination in bedrock. It does decrease, like it decreases horizontally, it is decreasing with depth, but further investigation needs to be done to understand really what's going on in the deep groundwater. At this time, a condition of no significant risk, which is a term for in the Massachusetts contingency plan, how you get to closure of a site, is reaching no significant risk, and we haven't achieved that right now. There are groundwater contamination that exceeds the standards for chlorinated VOCs and some petroleum fractions. And the soil does not reach because there's chlorinated VOCs, some petroleums, PAHs, which is I'm drawing a blank on what the PAH is. It's a symbol, an abbreviation I use all the time. Those and lead metals, polycyclic aerocarbons, hydrocarbons are what the PAHs are. Sorry about that. So right now the site can't be closed in the Massachusetts contingency plan. We've also looked at the vapor intrusion. So at the site, vapor intrusion mitigation measures are required due to elevated VOCs in the shallow groundwater. Vapor intrusion is when you have gases that come off of the soil and the groundwater. So any development on the site is going to need to put a barrier down so that those gases do not go into the buildings. Post office, there is a chronic risk to basement air in the post office due to the chlorinated VOCs. Because most of the town's funding on this is from the EPA, the town's funding cannot work on the post office property because EPA funding can't work on EPA federally owned property. So that is being operated by a different consultant and not directed by the town right now. But that they are working congruently with us, and there are reports being filed on that. That's being looked at. But because of the funding sources, it sort of has to stay separate for right now. One of the difficulties of getting funding from the federal government on this one. And then off-site properties, the 9 and 11 Rossiter Street properties. They have, they're non-resident occupants right now. But if they became residential properties, they're less than Mass DEP risk limit, so the vapor is not an issue on those properties.
Are they homes or is the Macedonian church?
It's the church and
There's a mixed use structure just next door to the church on Rossiter. It's kind of a taupe gray color. Maybe.
Yeah, I just know certain houses I don't, yeah.
Yeah, and those are, if you can picture that groundwater plume map, those are kind of on the far left of that plume. So we know that the contamination isn't really impacting them to that elevated risk level,
so
which is good.
those are the properties that are right
That's
next
the church.
next to the plume.
That's 9 and then 11,
So
where the mouse is. So the post office, which is on the bottom of the photo, as Scott says, has the issues with its basement indoor air caused by the contamination from this site. If you were to occupy the current building on the Ried Cleaner site, I mean, there's a lot of windows that are very loose, which ventilates the building, but a new building there in the current condition would have to have indoor air, like, you know, ventilation and things like that. So that's, just to summarize with some of what Scott was talking about.
and the last point, oh shoot, I'll go back. Why did we go back?
A little bit slow, Wi-Fi.
Sorry about that. The last point,
There, just slow.
is that there's no imminent hazard condition. So an imminent hazard is something that's directly, a risk to the public or people using the site. And that imminent hazard has been resolved at the site. That is not an issue.
Excuse me, does that include the post office? Like,
Yes,
they're no longer limited to time in the basement?
well, there's no imminent hazard there, but they have restrictions, that they're using to make sure that people aren't, put at risk. So with all this information, we've part of the EPA funding is to look at, and actually part of the MCP is to look at different alternatives. What could we do to clean this site up? And the objective of these remediation alternatives is to redevelop the site as a residential, commercial, and retail use, and reduce the risk posed by contamination at the site.
And if I could pause there, a couple of years ago, through some of EPA's cooperative grant making, we were able to conduct a few market studies for properties that the town had taken through foreclosure and were brownfield properties. One of them was Cook's Garage and one of them was Ried Cleaners. And mildly optimistic that it can be redeveloped eventually, if it were clean, could be redeveloped and be commercial or some kind of a mixed use site. So with that in mind, our objective is to get there, not leave a vacant building, not leave a vacant lot, but ideally to see the site reused in a way that benefits the town. So that's the objective that we're hoping to reach.
Yeah. And the building itself that's there, is that likely a demolition?
Well, that may be more of a structural question, which we're not here to answer. If it were to be occupied, and Scott can talk more about this, if it were to be occupied under the current conditions or future conditions, depending on how clean we can get it, it may have to have certain vapor or indoor air quality measures installed to make sure that you could safely occupy that building. But related but separate question, and maybe a little bit too far for us tonight, but it's a good question.
The first alternative that we always look at is no further action. What happens if we don't do anything? Is the site gonna continue to clean itself up? And based on all the information that we've shown you, no, this site needs something to happen. That's not gonna meet any of the objectives. Natural attenuation, is not gonna do much for this site. The alternative number two, we looked at this, was a large scale excavation, with disposal of and recycling of materials. And then remedial additive injections to address the groundwater plume. The large scale excavation that we looked at was about, I think it was 1,700 tons of soil. Excavating above the water table, and trying to get, as wide a footprint as we could with that. And then adding, additives in there. There's a lot of, biological reactions that happen in the groundwater that can break these chemicals down. And by providing them the right, chemistry in the water, by adding these additives, we can influence them to be more active. So, that's something that we looked at. That would allow, for a greater progress, a great progress towards a cleanup endpoint. By removing the impacted soil and treating the groundwater at the same time. This might achieve a cleaner groundwater within a accelerated timeframe. Remedial alternative number three, this is the one that we selected. Oh, and remedial alternative number two, that's about 2.5 million to put that into play. Remedial alternative number three is, I'm gonna put it in air quotes, limited soil excavation and off-site disposal. What we're looking at here is about 745 tons of soil to be excavated. But we're going down below the groundwater, where we're seeing that DNAPL, where that linear secondary source is, trying to get the highest contamination levels out of the site. If we can remove those, it's our opinion that you're gonna be better situated in terms of finding a better way to deal with the groundwater down the road. And that comes in with the $1 million price tag, is our estimate on that one.
Sorry, who would be responsible for the water down the road?
That is still the town's responsibility, as things stand right now. A developer may want to take it on, but
If, one scenario in which a developer could take it on, if the town was able to auction it or put it out through an RFP process and somebody wanted to purchase it and possibly redevelop it, this work would hopefully position the property for more success and less cost for that person. That person may then take on the responsibility of finishing the cleanup. Sometimes there are agreements made with the state that, the new person says, well, I didn't cause this, but I am gonna clean it up. I'll clean up, if I make it worse, I'll clean that up. Not responsible for this, and there's an agreement that basically says, okay, everybody's gonna work towards this end goal. So that can happen. It can be positioned for redevelopment and potentially redeveloped, even though there's still work to be done on the site. And that can be discussed with that party and with the states, with the state.
yes.
May I ask about the offsite disposal? It was my understanding, that particularly with 100 Bridge Street, that you could not take that contaminated soil offsite. It had to be stored there. Is this different?
This is different contamination and different soil. The Bridge Street site was PCPs and dioxins, and this is a much different contaminant. There are licensed landfills that can take this. So my understanding is does not have to remain on site, it can go off-site to a landfill that is licensed to take it. But
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, there's no good way to treat this soil on site. Especially in a downtown area with the size of this site.
and there's so much of it that you can't dig it up and leave it there.
745 tons, that's to me, a huge amount of soil.
A lot of
Am I
soil,
right?
so,
Is that
yeah,
a lot
so
of
there's no
dirt?
place to put it on the site, yeah.
Yeah, some sites and what's likely with the PCB, the nice thing about PCBs, even though they're bad, they don't move with groundwater.
This one with PCPs.
Oh, PCBs,
I don't
oh, okay, so,
think, but, yeah,
they don't move as much as water. The chlorinated VOCs, water dissolves them and takes them. So you don't cap this stuff and leave it in place as much as some other contaminants.
yeah, this can travel,
It can go to Ried.
well, no, it'll go towards the river generally, but it travels a lot easier than the stuff that is over at the log, is or was over at the log home site.
Mhm.
I'm not a geologist, but I'm wondering about, so you removing all that dirt, how does that affect the water flow that's moving slowly towards the river, groundwater?
Well, we're taking out the contamination, so it should help improve that groundwater flow.
So if you put more dirt in over where the hole.
Oh, yes, we're not gonna leave it at open.
Okay, so it's going to, that other dirt is going to function as a filtering possibility, I don't know.
The hope is that that's gonna remain clean, that there's, because we're gonna repave the site and not allow a lot more infiltration, and plus we're taking it just down gradient of where the source was. So the source has already been, EPA did a removal action there, took the worst of the stuff there. So we're taking this chunk out. The groundwater flowing into that should be mostly clean because there's nothing upgrading of this site. And we're taking out the worst of everything. There might be a little bit of, stuff that travels into that, but for the most part, this is gonna take out a lot of mass of contamination and situate the whole groundwater system, a lot better. So those numbers that are low on the edge, actually, usually when something like this happens, those decrease because you're taking the source of something, out of that, out of the beginning, so there's nothing feeding it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you may get to this later, but the question is when you can make a decision on your recommended alternative, but when would that relate to a decision on basically putting the property up for sale for development? So what I'm really getting at is that if a private developer makes a separate decision that it's worth another $1.5 million to go from one alternative to the other in terms of what it does to the marketability of the property, when would we let that private developer, that hypothetical private developer, make that assessment?
I think what I would hope is that with the funds we currently have, and if we can clean up the worst of it, as Scott mentioned, it will hopefully put the site in a position where at least a developer knows what they're dealing with. I think for years it's been, we didn't know how far the contamination had spread, what concentrations it was at, how deep it was, how it was traveling, where it was going. And so now we know most of that. All of that was big unknowns for a developer. So this will hopefully remove that as an unknown, as a black hole in their financial outlook for a development. So depending on how much success this excavation can achieve and the results that we can show at the end of it, the developer could say, that is or isn't enough for the use that I wanna put on the site. And for the use that I think I can put on the site and the money I'm gonna put in here and the mitigation measures I need to put in. I either do or don't need to do more work. Now, I think the hope is, and we would talk with Mass DEP on this, to how can we achieve it ultimately a quote unquote closure of the site, as Scott alluded to, how can we close the fact that this is still a contaminated site? So I think one way or the other, the town or the developer will have to get to the point where we can achieve some sort of closure. How quickly they need to go there, I'm not sure.
Is the option recommended will get us to that closure?
Not with the
that'll get us-
groundwater, unfortunately.
No,
Oh,
no,
okay. Another question, which I think you've already said, the children's room in the library is below grade. There's no fear this is going that way, and have we done any air monitoring?
there has been air monitoring there and it didn't pick on anything up of concern. And there's groundwater wells there that haven't picked anything up that I know of. So that's,
And the theory is that once we scoop out the source, it's not likely to get worse.
right,
Yes. And
that's not a theory, that's
Right,
just
sorry.
basic science,
Yeah.
that if you, yeah, if you take the worst out, it won't get worse.
Okay.
Yeah.
the last point on this remedial alternative, and this applies to both, 2 and 3, is an AUL, an activity use limitation, would be required at this site. And what those are, is limitations to what can happen on the site and how people can do work on the site. What would be likely, as we talked a little bit, is a vapor mitigation plan for any future development or use of the current property, building there. And that's all based upon what the type of vapor mitigation and everything would be based on the type of occupation that's gonna be used there. And there's also gonna be requirements for anybody working in the soil on that site in the future. They're gonna have to have soil management plans, proper health and safety, and for all that sort of stuff.
Does the $2.5 million plan dig out the same concentration as the $1 million plan?
No, the $2.5 million plan was staying above the water table.
That's what I
So,
thought.
so we weren't diving down as deep, which, in some ways is easier to excavate because you're gonna be digging into the groundwater. You have to deal with cleaning that groundwater as part and pumping that out. But, we really think getting that deep stuff out of there and then along that linear feature, that secondary source is gonna clean the site up a lot more.
Because the $2.5 million plan does not do that, so you actually be leaving the heavy concentration behind, is that?
And trying to treat that with remedial additives. Yeah. And one more point on the AUL, there may be some land use restrictions such as single-family homes, which probably isn't a plan for that property anyways. And possibly the use of the need of clean utility corridors, basically, if you're putting in a water main or something like that, they require clean soil so that future utility emergency response don't get exposed to stuff.
So can we clarify what we would be left with if we elect for the limited soil excavation? So we would have put $1 million, assuming we could do this work for the just over $1 million of funds that we have. What, and then we want to put that property up for sale, what use restrictions would be on that property?
We're gonna have to do a little bit of testing. We test the boundaries of the excavation, see what's left behind. We've done some limited risk assessment of that already, and these are the things that are likely that I'm listing right now with that.
So I'm sorry, just to clarify, what you're saying is the I'm struggling to figure out where we would do, what would be the situation with the property after the work? So are we saying that we put down a vapor barrier, it could be used for something other than residential construction?
Other than single family residential. Yeah, yes, that's likely.
So for example, if we wanted to put a building in there consistent with the rest of downtown, have a first story commercial and then apartments in 2, 3, that would be, you're suggesting that would be very possible at that point.
Yes, that is what we believe. That dealing with this soil, and the nice thing with this plan is that the development could start without wholly addressing the groundwater. We don't have to get to the groundwater being completely addressed before development could start, so redevelopment of the property could start.
One question.
Yeah.
Unrelated, when you're doing the excavation, how much danger is there to disturbing the air? What do we do as we're driving down the street while that's going on? Do we have to wear masks at that point? I'm wondering.
That's one thing that we are very concerned with our plans and what we put out in the bid specs. So there are foams that they can use and water spraying to keep dust and other odors down during the excavation activity if that's needed. We're gonna be doing perimeter monitoring. There's gonna be a requirement for perimeter monitoring to make sure that the workers in the site doing the work are safe, but also the public at the boundaries. And if things and we're gonna make sure the contractors are ready to respond with mitigation issues mitigation measures, not issues, measures to address any odor or contaminant that may be reaching the boundaries, so that that's not an impact to the town or general public.
There's a question online from Brittany. You should be able to unmute yourself and talk.
Hi, thank you. Are you able to hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
We can-
great, thank you. I'm wondering if that data collected during the excavation phase will be available in real time. I know that, for example, in Pittsfield with a number of projects that have been tracking certain contaminants, the data is available a day later or sometimes several days later. Is this information able to be published day of in real time for the community?
That was not something that we put into the plans, but I can look into that and we can address that.
Have you seen it done in other places?
I know it has been done. We haven't dealt with that recently. So, but I think that might be something that we could do in some way.
In theory, are these the types of things that can be monitored like that and shown in real?
Yeah, the perimeter monitoring is collected on a daily basis usually, and so it might be 2 days, for us, 1 day to process it and then 1 day to post it type of thing, in theory, but that's something we could definitely look at and discuss.
Okay.
And get back to the public on that.
Okay. Is there anything else, Brittany, for now?
No, thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry, my computer locked me out. So what does this excavation area look like? So again, here's the slide showing the entire site. Did I go backwards? No. Okay, here's the slide showing the entire site. You can see the excavation area a little bit, but I'm gonna zoom in on that center there and so we can see that a little bit better. So our plan is this yellow hatch area is the area that's gonna be excavated, along with removing any sewer pipe or utility pipe that we can find that's on the property that is that linear secondary source.
So this is a very zoomed in picture of the back what's essentially now a parking lot, paved parking lot area behind the building that's on the site now. This is in the back behind that site. So to the right of your screen is more parking lot, and off your screen to the right is the existing building that fronts Main Street. To the bottom of your screen is the post office parking lot and driveway, and then further off the bottom of your screen is the post office itself.
So that sewer pipe, we're looking to remove about 75 linear feet of that, to give you an idea of the scale that's being shown right there. And that yellow hatched area is just under 640 square feet of area that we're gonna go down to about 15 feet.
It's like a couple of parking spaces worth of surface area, but it goes deep, and it includes that sewer pipe excavation. That's where the worst of the stuff still remains under the pavement.
That's the last slide that I have. I don't know if there's any more questions. See one online.
Yep. iPhone, you could just unmute yourself and tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Tabakin. I'm a consultant for the Du Bois Freedom Center, and I have some questions about both the map of the current groundwater area and sort of whether it's impacting anywhere near the Clinton Church, which is under construction. And then also when you're doing this excavation that's impacting that parking lot, which shares the back of the post office, what's your staging area? And how would that potentially impact any ongoing construction? And I guess, are there any other ways where it may impact the project at Clinton Church?
Thank you.
Were you able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, nice to see you, Chris, too.
So the Clinton Church for folks is off screen to the left of your screen up on Elm Court. It's west of this subject property and well away from the groundwater contamination. The wells haven't detected anything up in that area, and the groundwater doesn't move westerly from this site westerly towards the Clinton Church. It moves in the opposite direction, easterly towards Main Street. So there's no cause for concern that the existing contamination would impact the Clinton Church site. Hopefully that answers your questions.
The other question she had was about the parking and impacting the post office.
Oh, and the staging.
The staging, we're gonna be using the site proper itself, we're not going onto the post office. And so the whole site will be fenced off, so people that use that as parking, that will not be available. One thing I didn't mention is this is planned to be occurring, August and September of this year. Half of the funding, that the town has for this, expires, at the end of September. So that has to be spent or it's lost. So.
Yeah, that connects to my question, which is, is your view that there are contractors available to do this work in the time frame that you're hoping?
We had a number of interested contractors reach out to collect the bids. The bids went out today, the bid sheets went out today. We're having a site walk on Tuesday with the contractors, so there seems to be a good level of interest in this work.
Is there anything else, Jennifer, at this time?
No, I think that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Eric?
Do you have a sense of the value of this property? If going through the different cleaning stages, what it's worth to the town?
No, the question is, do I have a sense of the value of the property? No, I can't really speculate on that. I mean, it's $1 million negative right now, let's say, at least, because that's the amount of work that has to be done. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Questions? Anybody want to offer suggestions, acronyms,
I
other
should have said,
concerns?
I should have said an appreciation for making this, I mean, it's a lot of work to do this stuff, and so the fact that you did it, it's been a dead space for a long time. And express the appreciation for taking it on.
Well, dry cleaner sites are very, very difficult. The contamination, as Scott said, moves a lot and can move quickly, so it's tough to nail down and understand where it is. That initial slide Scott showed had a decade of assessment work and testing, and people from various parties, both the previous owners and abutters. And then since the town became the owner of Last Resort, the town working on it with EPA's and Mass DEP and Mass Development's cooperative assistance. So it's taken a long time. There's been a number of different assessments. As Scott said, EPA was able to come in and dig some of the worst stuff out, but you know, at every time that bucket of funds is limited, we do as much as possible. Now we have another bucket of funds, we're gonna try to do as much as possible. And we think as we said, position it that redevelopment could theoretically start. So that's where we hope to get to.
Is there a risk of like stumbling upon something and releasing something into the ground that is like, oops, is there an oops risk factor here?
Is that a technical? Do you test for oops risk? No,
Well,
it's good.
we're gonna be out there excavating and removing stuff, so they're ready to clean stuff out. With the
There's a
sewer
lot
pipe,
that is known at this point.
with the sewer pipe, if that's full of Napple, the three-phase product, we'll get rid of that right then and there. So, you know, I've been at sites where you dig and you find a new tank. I don't think that's gonna happen here. We've done a lot of holes. We would have probably hit it.
And it's-
But that's part of the excavation activities and we're right there. We're getting stuff off the site, so we'll address that, right where we're at. And, that's, you know, get the worst of it out of here is the plan, so that you can have and again, this is not gonna be a hole left there. This is gonna be filled back up and it's gonna be asphalted, so the parking lot will look a little prettier when it's done.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure I'm adding all the things you said together, right? So, the bids are going out, to do this, and it'll be done by, you're hoping the end of summer for about $1 million, and I know you said that's an estimate, and we have the money?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We do have the money.
Just a question for a non-geologist. The plume has all gone one way. Is that because it's going towards the river?
Yes, groundwater flow is flowing in that
Because there
direction.
was no drift for reasons other than groundwater.
Well, that's part, the linear, and you can see that there is a northern component to this. And that's those linear features that we're hypothesizing is the reason. And by taking out this one that's just south of, or just east of the release area, we think we're gonna limit further migration to the north. Not that it's gonna move, that line's gonna move further, but just the contamination feeding that area to the north.
There's a lot of testing to figure out why, if the groundwater moves from left to right on your screen or from west to east generally, why some contamination was popping up north. Because groundwater isn't moving in that direction. So the theory was that there was some pipe or some channel of some kind that was taking the contamination in an unnatural way, in an artificial way. And so a lot of trenches, a lot of borings and test wells were done in this area to try to figure out what was in there. And there's some sort of old utility fixture in there from way back when. It may have been connected to the dry cleaner building. It may have been connected to an old boarding house there from 100 years ago. We don't know, but somehow it seems to be conveying contamination in a way that isn't necessarily doesn't meet up with the way the groundwater flows in this area. So that's why it's so important to get that utility, whatever it is, out of there.
I'm just concerned about Rossiter Street. And I just hope the monitoring is really good there because
Yeah, we did a
it's
bunch.
a residential area primarily.
We did a bunch of testing along there and as we did the indoor air, there are some wells up in the street and that have been looked at. And that area is not showing, any issues. And again, it being up gradient, not the direction the groundwater is flowing. And,
Yeah, but you mentioned the Macedonian Church and you mentioned the other site.
yeah, because they're right there. And that's why we did the testing there. And we continue to do indoor air testing, as part of this project because they are right next to it.
Is there an opportunity for the post office to contribute money to this cleaning? If removing the cause helps their situation, is that a possibility?
No, not directly. The short answer is the funds from the different federal pots can't be mingled. Alright. That's the short answer. So we're gonna address the source and they'll continue to protect their workers and you know, hopefully this can help them achieve a clean basement in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
So the basement of the post office may not be cleaned through this either remediation plan? The 2.5 or the $1 million, it's not gonna affect the basement?
We're not addressing groundwater in this, and that's the groundwater that's flowing in there that's causing that issue. So but by removing the source, there's gonna be less feeding that area. So I would expect down the road, it would start to decrease once that's removed. That's not gonna be an immediate sort of effect.
So the post office, their contamination, the basement issue was strictly from groundwater?
Yes,
Okay.
There's a sump pump or something, or a
Yes.
sump that,
so their basement is actually, right at the water table, and they have a pump in there that's pumping water, that's groundwater infiltrating into there, so it's sort of, you know, why there's an issue.
So would that make the $1 million remediation plan that's gonna actually dig down further be more effective for the post office?
Yes, it should help them, and decrease that level over time.
And who cleans the post office and funds it?
well, the postal service, has a different,
It's a federal building.
yeah,
I understand that.
yeah,
So who
so I'm not sure who is working with, like, where that funding comes from, but they have their own contractors, like we have TRC.
But from the EPA.
I don't know if it's from EPA or not, actually, I just don't know the answer to
Do you
that.
know Scott?
I don't know who's funding that work, or how that work is being funded.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that part of things. I've been looking at their testing and their results, but I haven't.
Did the EPA do their testing and their results?
I don't think it's not the same branch of EPA that we're working with. It might be another part of EPA, but I don't think it's the same Brownfield group that we're working with.
We share the results, but I just don't know the answer to that question.
I can look and see if that's documented in their reports, and we can post that information.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody else online? All right, well, thanks. Feel free to, the reports on the town website. As I said in the library, you can email me. And hopefully, you'll see some work start later this summer.
Great.
Great. Okay, thanks, everyone.